In this video, you're going to learn how to write clean code. We're going to cover what clean code is, why we need to write clean code and why it's important. And finally, and most importantly, we will look at 5 examples of ugly code and be fixing it with good programming principles, aka clean code. So the $1,000,000 question we may have, right, is what the hell is clean code? And look, I've looked at many definitions. I literally went through this whole book. I bought this book specifically for this greater understanding of what clean code is. And the simplest example of what clean code is code that is easily read. And more specifically, right, it is code that can be read by an outsider programmer that has no idea what your code is doing. So for example, let's say we had person A over here and he wrote the program, and then there's person B over here, we're gonna call him number 2. A clean code written by person number 1 will be classified as clean code if this programmer over here with the adequate skills, obviously to know code, is able to read this guy's code without knowing anything about the program. Now let's erase this ugly mess because it just looks disgusting. And some examples of clean code may include clear variable names, so having good names for your variables. Also not repeating yourself, so non-repetitive code. Also a good one is knowing when to break down your code. So maybe instead of having one large function, you'll know when to make 2 separate functions. And finally, the basics such as indentation and proper spacing. Overall, okay, at its core, clean code is just code that can be easily read by another person using principles that make your code easy to read. And obviously there's much more to clean code, such as the tests that you run for your code, the type of notes that you take. But all in all, if your code is easily read by yourself and it is clean and precise, then you've hit the jackpot. Next up, okay, why do we need to write clean code? Like, what's the importance of writing these decent codes? Because if you think about it, there's no real purpose to the code, like we could just write the code. It doesn't really matter, right? That is where you will be mistaken, okay? Sure, in smaller applications, it may not matter what type of code you write, especially if it's just like a 1-page JavaScript function or it's a page of HTML. However, when it comes to bigger applications, you need to have a decent looking code because you will constantly be referring back to other aspects of the program. And if you don't have a clear and concise way of knowing what something is, you cannot reuse it. So another example, right? Let's say this is me, okay? Me with a nice little smiley face here. And let's say I am writing a piece of code. I may say to myself, oh, I don't need to worry about how I'm naming, how I'm indenting, how precise I am. However, right, maybe after 2 days, 3 days, or hell, even a couple of months, right? If I want to refer back to this code, I need to know exactly what this program does and know it to a T. And if I don't write the precise code and I'm clear about what it does, then I will just be more confused and I wouldn't know what the program does. Also, it's really important to have clean code because you'll be working in teams. Like, it's not just you writing the code. And if you know anything about working in open source projects or working at a company, you're not just writing code for yourself. You're writing it for a group of people that may need to review it, that are obviously going to be utilizing it. And being clear on what you are writing and being concise as possible is always good practices. And finally, the main reason why we want to write clean code is because in a lot of aspects, it's faster. Now, obviously, in many aspects, this is not always the case. If you have a HTML document that has 10 less lines, it doesn't really matter on the speed of the app. But let's say you have like an algorithm that you need to be as concise as possible and you need to be the best possible algorithm. You obviously want it to be the cleanest and most concise way possible because it'll run faster. And all right, so we've gone over the hard parts, I guess. We've covered what and why. But next up, I wanted to cover something that no other YouTuber has really done, at least well. And it is some examples of what clean code is and how we can apply it into our code. Because, it's like one thing to just know what it is. There's a book over here, it's 400 pages. This whole thing, it's a big ass book. But I'm not going to learn clean code by just reading this. It's dumb. I need to actually apply it. So we're going to cover some problems in my actual program for my application and utilize the principles that we just talked about. So the first example would be this tutoring page that I have in my application. And I'm going to zoom out because you can see everything. But as you can see here, right, there are different aspects to my tutoring. So basically I'm just listing out the benefits to my tutoring, such as learn faster with an icon and get the benefits of learning code, you know, and then we have you're able to stay focused, whatever, just an example. And if you're any sort of experienced developer, you'll know exactly what's wrong with this code. And it is that we are repeating ourselves constantly. This block of code is being repeated once, twice, 3 times, and 4 times. We've repeated the same exact block of code, like the design, 4 times. And instead of repeating ourselves like this, right, which this looks like idiotic. This looks like so much code, okay? Instead, what we can do is just delete this and go up here, and you can see the more concise way of doing this. And rather than having a bunch of code doing the same thing, we just mapped through each feature by going through this piece of data up here and just wrote it in a very clear and concise manner. And as you can see, this literally looks cleaner. It looks so much cleaner, not only in the objective sense of the word, but just in terms of code. If you saw this piece of code, you'll know exactly what's going on. We're mapping through the features of tutoring, and we're naming out the feature name, we're showing the feature icon, and finally we're describing the feature. Next up, we have an example of one that, I don't know, it's not really a big deal, but I still wanted to cover it, and it is the naming aspect of applications. And in this code, we're simply sending data to the API of courses when we're publishing or unpublishing a course on the application. And a main problem here, right, is in here. So we have 2 success messages, and they are saying different things. And so in this example, right, you already know what I'm going to do, but we probably want to have these as the same name. Okay, so rather than having guides unpublished and then course published, let's just change it to course. In addition, you can see the spacing is a little weird, and so we can just fix it by spacing things out like this and this. And in this example, I know it's not really a big deal, you know, why do you change it from course to guide? But again, keeping it consistent will just help you out so much in the long term. And as I'm moving more and more into open source projects, I really want to get good at this. So next up, we have a little nav bar here of ours. And this problem of how we can kind of clean this up a bit goes into the indentation of the nav bar. Right now, we can see that it's very inconsistent, and I don't really know what the hell is going on. On the one hand, here we have weird spacings. We have a mobile sidebar that's hugging the div. And at the bottom here, we have a user button and a search button. And off the top of my head, what I would probably do here, and what we actually have to do because this is my actual code, is remove the spacing here, maybe indent the mobile sidebar like this, and then remove the spacing over here. In addition, we can remove the spacing like this, as well as like this, move this back like that, move the images back to remove the spacing like this. And as you can see, this looks a lot better. Again, this is just in terms of looks, and this is what you want in clean code. And look, we've mainly covered like HTML code indentations. That's one thing. In addition, in actual code, we can work on spacing, naming, and actual functionalities. So an example of this would be the API for the publishing section. And just off the naked eye, I haven't seen this in a long time, it looks confusing. Like I'm looking at this, I'm saying, okay, so we have a try catch block, and okay, this looks good, right? We're printing out the course ID if there is an error, but you can see here, right? This does not look natural. So what I'd probably do in this situation is just space things out like this, just so it's more readable, and space this out as well. And this looks a lot cleaner. In addition, in this example here, I'm not a big fan of writing notes everywhere in the app, but in this example, we're just doing so much that I think we could get away with writing some notes. So maybe here we can write, get course database, because we're calling that database. And maybe here we can check if the course has a published chapter. And finally here we can just write a note saying update the course. So again, we just updated the indentation and just wrote some notes for the sake of ourselves in the future to know what's going on. Because I honestly had a hard time understanding what's going on in this code before opening it. So, this will obviously help me in the future. And the final thing I wanted to cover is the naming of components. It's one thing to name variables and stuff like that, but it's another to name components, because oftentimes we may write a lot of things and naming it can be annoying. And so in this example here, in the final example, we have this function called 3D. And the main function of 3D is to display the testimonials of my community who wrote some very nice things about me. And the name 3D just doesn't sit right with me. You know, obviously it's a 3D card that moves when you hover over it. That's the whole point. But maybe we can name it something like 3D testimonials maybe, and then change it over here to 3D testimonials, just like this, and remove this like that. And as you can see, a simple change like that can just make the whole difference. And yeah, just a little change, but you know, oftentimes just naming it after the whole thing, although it may be a little bit longer, it's definitely worth it if you're gonna work with other people. But yeah, those are just a couple of examples that I would probably utilize clean code. I know it's more important in functional applications, and that's why I've tried to show you more of like the API use cases and talking to the database. But still, even if you're just working on a front-end app, it will not hurt to utilize these principles, such as taking notes, not repeating yourself, splitting functions, and obviously indenting where you need to indent. And if you want a more in-depth version of clean code, I highly recommend this book called Clean Code by Robert Martin, which has this quite cool name, but they go into insane depth. Like they go into testing code, bad and good comments, when to use third-party libraries rather than writing your own sort of library. So it's a really cool book on in-depth clean code. It really helped me out. Yeah, that is clean code. And by the way, if you want to join the Discord community where we have the best freaking group in the world, I'm serious about that, then I will leave the link to our Discord server down below. I'm telling you, it's just amazing. I'm really grateful for everything we have here. We have everything from job opportunities, as you can see, to discussions, to showcase. If you're even posting content on coding, we have a whole section for that. And also, if you want tutoring, I am offering a free consultation to anyone that wants. We can go over your, what you're dealing with. We can go over some concepts and organize everything so you can optimize your coding journey. So if that's something you're interested in, more in-depth things, then I will leave everything down below. Happy coding, good luck, and write clean code, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.